Welcome to episode 105 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast of opinions made up of four of the greatest minds ever discussing our passion for Linux. I'm Ryan, and with me today are the kings of podcasting. Zeb, how are you this week, sir?
I'm doing really well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing awesome. And Michael, how are you this week?
Fantastic.
And Noah, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
Awesome. So Zeb, what is new with you this week?
Well, bit of a same old with me installing distributions and trying them out. But I actually decided today to join Jason Evangelo. That's the new chap that's come over to Linux from Forbes, and he's on Twitter put out a 2-week elementary OS challenge. To just use it instead of distro hopping, instead of Windows, instead of your usual Linux distribution. So I'm running it now. I only set it up 2 hours ago, and so far it's pretty good. So we're gonna see how that goes.
That's awesome. I saw that, and we're in the works of maybe getting him on the show as a guest. So that will be awesome. Noah, what have you been up to this week, sir?
So some of you know that I have gotten a second part-time job that is taking more and more time out at a radio station. And this week they came to me and they said, we want to start doing more web presence stuff. I said, well, that'd be great. I would go ahead and utilize this technology called Linux. I would go ahead and utilize technologies like RTMP and OBS and some of these open software techniques and tools. And they said, okay, so what kind of budget are we looking at here? 30,000, 35,000, 50,000? About free, give or take a couple bucks here for, some USB audio interfaces, but about in the free area ish. And so they went out, and I think they were in a little bit of disbelief, but we went out and we did an event, and I got a chance to work with one of the best sportscasters in this area. And he went out and called a boys wrestling match, and we did the entire broadcast using entirely Linux and open source based software.
Wow.
And we got done. And within a couple of hours, the work that we had done made it all the way up to the owner of the broadcasting company, the president of the organization, who doesn't even live here. And as far as I know, it's the first time he's ever heard my name. And part of that was that they were blown away of the quality and the product that could be put out when you harness open source and Linux. And so I didn't go into that business environment with the idea of I want to introduce people to Linux. Of course, I'm always the guy that's willing to do that if the opportunity presents itself, but I was there to learn the trade of talk radio, not necessarily to tell them about technology. And they're operating system agnostic. Like, they just want the best tool for the job. They could care less. But everything else that they had tried to get this kind of product on the air, any other roads that they'd ever gone down, apparently had not led to success. Linux and open source got them there. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, to me, it really, I think those are way more of a testament to the future of Linux than the people that come into it and say, well, I have an allegiance, or I have a commitment to open source software. So how can I do this in open source? Because the presupposition there is that person is already ready to use Linux and open source. So when you can take people that just have high quality demands and high quality requirements, and they come into it, and then open source fits that niche, and then open source fills that gap. Now we know that that's a real professional tool in a broadcast environment in this particular case. And I think that bodes really well for what the future is going to be for Linux.
Nice.
Love it.
Well, congratulations. It was a pretty good broadcast.
That was fun.
So, Michael, what kind of trouble have you had this week? Because we know computers can be really tough for you. So is it a disk problem, editing issue?
So I actually improved certain things. I now have a lot of disk space to use. I got rid of
a whole 50 megs.
I got a whole terabyte now. And
wow.
Yes, I deleted a bunch of stuff that I found a drive that I hadn't looked at in like 3 or 4 years, and was like, oh, I could use that. And it just deleted mostly everything that was on there. But what actually was interesting I did recently was this past Wednesday, I did a co-host for Floss Weekly on the Twit network, and we talked about Monero, blockchain, cryptocurrency, things like that with the Tari project. and it was really interesting to if you're interested in blockchain or cryptocurrency, that's a good episode to check out, because I did wonderful as a co-host.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
What I found interesting about that is I had absolutely no idea technically what that chap was talking about, but he had such a passion for what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He made it interesting. It was really, really good.
You're talking about Ricardo?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting to listen to him too. He's done like a couple talks at like DEF CON and things, and he approaches it depending on whose audience is, where he does the super technical stuff or just the interesting like overview kind of thing. So this was more like a combination of the two.
Yeah, the people who are in cryptocurrency are in it like people who are into Linux. It's a very much a passion for them, and they love to talk about it. And just when I did that video on cryptocurrency recently on my channel, whole new audience of people kind of in there digging into the cryptocurrency and Bitcoins and all of that stuff and the blockchain technology. It's a very cool thing to just spend some time getting out there and learning. All right, so this episode is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with an intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls, load balancers, and more. You can get all of this, plus access to the world-class customer support for as low as $5 per month, or you can use the flexible pricing structure for as low as 0.7 cents per hour. That's darn near free, Michael. 0.7 cents per hour. That's only 0.7 of 1 cent per hour. DigitalOcean also has 2,000 cloud-agnostic tutorials to help you stay up to date with the latest open source software languages and frameworks. And I've used probably 1,500 of them myself because I love their tutorials. So get started with DigitalOcean for free with a $100 credit. That's $100 in credit by going to do.co/DL. That's do.co/DL.
Yeah, and there's also a good update to the previous episode. We talked about setting up an Etherpad. I built one. It works good. We're going to try it next week. So we're going to drop the ridiculous Google Docs thing that Zeb loves for some reason, and we're gonna try out Etherpad, and it's gonna be great.
I'm so happy.
I can't wait. I'm gonna price switch over to Etherpad for my show as well. Not that I use Google Docs to begin with, but I use something else, and think Etherpad would be better. Anyway, we invite you to send us an email. Chris did that this week, and Chris says, "Good day, guys. Been listening to the podcast for a bit and hitting all of the older ones I can find. Great job on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Nice.
Let me tell a long tale. So you're forced to read a bit of history before the juicy bits. I've been a Linux hobbyist enthusiast for the past 20 years, starting with an old version of Mandrake Linux back in the Windows 2000 days. I put together a PC from parts scavenged, loaded with Mandrake, and gave it to a family member who had no computer and wanted their son with learning disabilities. I put in an ad in the newspaper, which is how they contacted me. Since then, I've been tinkering with Linux and shown my own sons what got them interested through our major desktop focus, Windows and focus, and always Windows thanks to gaming. Every few months or so, I had an urge to load several distros and hop around on hardware that I've been testing to see if I could move over permanently. This has been a pattern of mine for years. Fast forward to the past month, I've decided to take another stab at getting on Linux primarily, and I'm still in the process of getting everything sorted out so that gaming is something that I have limited time for and don't typically play the latest games. Proton certainly has caught my eye. The juicy bit is that I've been dangling since you have read the subject line is that I work for Microsoft. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He works for Microsoft. And I've been supporting Microsoft technologies my entire career for a very long time. While at Microsoft, I've supported SharePoint, Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams, and pretty much all of Office 365. I have been sad that we say Microsoft loves Linux, and I couldn't see it from where I was sitting from within Microsoft. I knew that we all did some things regarding Linux and open source, but I had no insight into the large company, to say the least. A few weeks ago, I found out that there was an opening to work with our customers supporting their open source workloads running on Azure. So I applied, and I got hired.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. I will now see within the next couple of weeks I will now, within the next couple of weeks, be working to support open source community and Linux as part of Microsoft. I intend to be spreading the open source software knowledge within Microsoft and maybe get some peers to run Linux on their work machines. This is an open invitation. If you have any questions around Microsoft technologies or strategies, I'm happy to answer them. I'm not part of Satye's team or anything, was way further down the organization chart, but I'm happy to share what I can. I hear that other podcasts poop on Microsoft while at the same time spouting things that are incorrect. I don't hear that from Destination Linux, and I'm thankful for that, minus Zeb's statement about Microsoft being an evil machine.
Fake news.
Yeah, technically, he just said Michael was an evil dual booter.
Yeah, he was talking about Michael, not Microsoft.
And it was a filthy dual booter, which Michael is.
That's not true. Fake. I agree. Fake news.
The machine is not evil. Michael is filthy for his dual booting.
That's right.
Anyway, I'm also open to discussing within the Telegram community, but I haven't outed myself as a mole for Microsoft.
So we have to find him in that chat. Maybe we could get our guest on the show to find and uncover who it is.
We don't want to do that. And I'll tell you why. Okay. And here's the thing. There's a natural inclination for people to say, how could anybody that values open source work at Microsoft or Apple or Google or whatever? Here's the way that you're framing that conversation wrong. You're framing that question wrong, and you're looking at it from the wrong perspective. The question you should be asking yourself is, if we want Microsoft to do more open source things, how do we get more people like those guys to work for Microsoft? Not the other way. We don't want to take the people that are working for Microsoft to open source, take them out of Microsoft. That doesn't make any sense. That's backwards. Let's get more of those people into Microsoft, into Apple, into Google, and try to change those companies from the inside out.
Yep. Well, he may not have outed himself in Telegram before, but by signing the email Chris, he just did.
Wow. We only have one Chris in the Telegram group?
Well, yeah, it could be fake. He could be signed in as Michael, which would be a brilliant idea. So we never know. But the point of
his real name is probably Albert.
There was a lot of
he's probably got his Telegram name is probably Christoph.
We'll never figure out who it is. There's a lot of great points in this email, but one of the things I was really proud of is the fact that we haven't gone out there and just beat up on different products and things for their use cases, except for Michael being a filthy dual booter. But outside of that, we totally wouldn't do that. And I love that got called out. But I also love that he's been able to find his way career-wise into utilizing Linux in his career, and it's helped him get a new job within Microsoft, which is a very cool place to be working on those open source projects, because there's just probably a ton of work and growth potential going on there with all the activity in the market related to cloud services and open source. So it's kind of benefited multiple ways there, and that's just kind of proof of how this is fun and we all love it, but it also could be something you can make a living off of and help your career with as well.
Yep, it's a great and also to reiterate Noah's point, like the idea that we should be some reason offended or whatever because people use these they're part of these different companies that the Apple or Microsoft, if they're a part of it, you kind of have an opportunity to if they're already there, to convince them to change things in Microsoft or maybe even infiltrate certain sections of the thing so that it allows them to change more of the idea of their company, so that the end goal could be not only just to hate Microsoft, but maybe Microsoft to become a partner for the actual ecosystem. I mean, I'm not saying that they're doing that right now, but there's at least now there's a potential chance that they might. So that's that's fantastic, and we shouldn't be attacking people who are a part of that. We should be applauding them and helping in any way we can to make that the experience for them easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, thank you so much for that email. And Zeb, what message do you have for our listeners?
Well, again, that's just a really good example of why we want to hear from you, our listeners. So send us an email this week asking that burning question or simply giving us some feedback, and send your emails to comments@destinationlinux.org.
So this week we have a very special guest with us that many of you have been looking forward to hearing from. We talked about in the Telegram group, everybody's been talking about wanting to hear from a pen tester directly, wanting to get more information on server security and those type of things. And we promised that we had somebody coming on the show just for that. And so the wait is finally over. With us today is Beau Weaver Beau, welcome to the show.
No, thank you for having me.
So for those who don't know, Beau is an author of several books related to penetration testing and Kali Linux. He works as a penetration tester and security researcher by day and promoter of open source, of course, by night. In addition, Beau has worked in physical security fields, executive protection, and as a private investigator. So do not mess with him. That's my advice. It would not be a good idea. So, Beau, you and I met at Southeast Linux Fest last year. We ended up having a really awesome conversation. And
yes, we did.
I asked you to come on the show, and then months passed because we started transitioning on Destination Linux and had new hosts and all this stuff. But we finally got our stuff together, and we are so happy to have you here for this conversation. So my first question for you, before we get into all the fun details about your job, because I think you have a job a lot of people would love to have, we'd like to start our interview by finding out, how did you start in Linux to begin with? How did your journey begin?
Well, actually, my journey with computers started back in 1972 when I was in the Navy, and those were Unix systems. My first experience with Linux was back in the early 90s. I was really disgusted with Windows, having worked on Unix systems in the Navy, and the way Windows is just so crappy. And so one day I was in CompUSA and saw a copy of Red Hat Linux 2.4 box copy with a book, and I bought it for $18 and took it home and loaded Red Hat up on an old system I had and blew it up about 50 times until I finally felt comfortable with it. And then I started using it as my daily driver and haven't went back since.
Nice.
That's awesome.
In my house here, I have about 10 machines, and that's not including DigitalOcean droplets and stuff. But the only box I have in this house that runs Windows is a little laptop I have as a testing target. The only thing I use it for is a target.
That's the best.
That's like throwing darts at a little dartboard, isn't it? There's the machine. Let's have at it.
Nice. So Ryan mentioned that he met you at Self, and that you were working in the Linux security and pen testing. So tell us about your work and how you leverage Linux to do it.
Okay, for work and for my personal laptops, I run Kali Linux with a KDE desktop. And of course, Kali is not really, I wouldn't say, I don't suggest it for your average computer user. The reason why I use Kali for my daily driver is this is what I do for a living. Kali's not set up. For one thing, when you load Kali, you only have a root login, which we all know you never work under root, unless you're pen testing, and then you need direct access to the hardware and stuff. So when you set Kali up, there's only a root account, where like in Ubuntu, when you set it up, you get a user account and do everything by sudo. But so, if somebody comes to me, I recommend Ubuntu for, if I want to swap over, I recommend Ubuntu. Back in the day, I used to build laptops for testing, and it took weeks to go out, find the tools, bring them around, compile them, and also fix the dependencies when you compiled. I know you guys remember make, install. Yeah. It was really a nightmare and took about a week. And with Kali, you have this nice distribution with all the tools you need. In less than an hour, you got a pen testing box.
So that's a mistake, though, that a lot of people make, and I'm glad you clarified that, is Kali Linux looks cool. It's got all these awesome tools. People are interested in that, but they'll tend to try to run it as their desktop. Don't do that, right?
Well, what I do is when I install it, I put a normal user account on. Like right now, I'm running Kali, but we're having this, this webcast, and I'm under my Beau account on this machine. Yeah. So that way you can run Kali, but you have to go in and manually do it. It's not, that doesn't happen in the setup like any other distribution where it asks you to put in a user account. You have to do it manually, and that's what I do. I don't do any kind of emailing, web browsing, or anything like that on this machine unless I'm under my Beau account.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean that's the best option, because there's a lot of people who they hear Kali, or they hear the hacking idea and they're like, oh, well, I'm going to use Kali Linux, and then they use it and they're not prepared to do it. But someone who does it for their job, it makes sense that you would use something like that as your daily.
Right.
Yeah.
But what are some of the tools specifically that you utilize for penetration and security testing?
My favorite tool is Fedor's Nmap. I cannot live without Nmap. I've been using Nmap for so long I can't remember. And I mean, it's the Swiss Army knife of network diagnostic tools. Yes, you can do some small hacks with Nmap, but the great thing about Nmap is it's just such a wonderful diagnostic tool that you can footprint a machine and find out what you're dealing with. I mean, I used it as a network administrator all the time, troubleshooting, whether a web server was up or not. First thing I go to is, Nmap, and see if port 80 is open and functioning properly.
I think a lot of people use Nmap for things like, let's see how many machines are on the network and which IPs they're at. And maybe some of, like you said, looking at ports. Is there anything about Nmap that you go, I walk around, I tell people, hey, I use Nmap and I do this thing with it. And they go, I never knew I could do that with Nmap. Is there any of those kind of functionality that you use Nmap for?
Yes, there's a lot of scripts, and that's something that's not documented well, and most people don't know about, but you can put a script flag in there. And if you go to user share Nmap scripts, it's got this whole load of scripts for every kind of service. I mean, you can enumerate an SMB port where you can pull out the domain name and stuff by using those scripts.
Really? Those scripts they're included in the basic Nmap install?
Yeah, they're in the Nmap install. You just,
very cool.
Best thing to do is run an ls on user share Nmap scripts, and there you can tell the list. And you, like with SMB, if you put tac script equals SMB star, that'll run all your SMB scripts. But if you're just looking for versioning, SMB versioning, you can just run that SMB versioning, and it'll pull all that version information from the SMB port that you wouldn't normally get if you just ran Nmap and found port 139 open.
Right. Very cool. I'll have to check that out.
That sounds really good. So we know that you've written some books on the subjects as well, because we mentioned it in the introduction. So the first thing you need to do is you need to send off an email to your publishers and say, when this Zebedee Boss character tries to buy the book, stop him. He will wreck his machine if you sell him one of these books, because I'm not the technical guy. I'm just a generic end user. So I'm really interested. Tell us about these books and where we can get our hands on them, and what sort of technical level do you think should start to look at them and learn them maybe?
Well, our publisher is Packet Publishing, which is spelled P-A-K-T, leave the E out of Packet. And you can also get them through Amazon. If you run a search on Amazon for Beau Weaver, you'll pull up all my books.
Nice.
The books are really, they're really written for an advanced person. Especially how the book came about was a friend of mine, Wolf, who's also a pen tester and security researcher. We were all the time asked by Windows systems admin, how do you do a pen test? And of course, them being engineers, they want a blow-by-blow description. They want to be able to reproduce it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that takes, that's a 6-hour conversation to even get started. So when Packet came to us about writing this book, that's what we wrote this book. This book is really geared towards Windows systems admin that want to learn how to do a PCI test or HIPAA test on their network themselves, and to verify what I find. Because a lot of time I hack into the network, the engineer wants to replicate what I do. And that's what this book is about. And you need to have a really good working knowledge of Windows systems, and especially Windows domain structure, because we don't get into the fundamentals of Windows domain or anything like that. We do show you how to fully exploit a domain and pull down all the user accounts, but we don't get into how to set it up.
Very nice. So you also have your book specifically, Kali Linux 2018 Windows Penetration Testing. Tell us about how you use this. Someone would use this book to protect Windows in practice, because there's some interesting chapters about that, about using Kali to protect Windows.
Well, the whole thing of protecting Windows with Kali is you can use it to find these exploits and to harden the machine.
Okay. Specifically how, or?
Well, for one thing, Kali comes with any kind, it's a complete security package. Not only does it have exploitation tools, but it comes with OpenVAS scanning tools. It comes with open source intelligent tools like multi-ego, to where you can use those to go out on the internet and find out what your digital footprint, your company's digital footprint is. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of a lot of people think that hacking is just sitting at the keyboard running exploits, but you have to really pen test, you have to do a lot of footprinting, and that's knowing your target. It's kind of like deer hunting. If you go out in the woods and go deer hunting, you just go sit in the woods and wait on a deer, you're not going to get it. You have to go into the woods, find the deer trails, watch the deer's traffic, so that you're able to go sit in a certain spot in the wood and know that deer at 2 p.m. is going to come down this trail. Mm-hmm. And it's the same way in hacking. Like, there's a tool called Cool, CEWL, which what it does is it spiders the sites and finds the common names that are in a website. Like, say, if you were scanning something like hotels.com, say. Well, it'll scan the site and find out what the common words, because people that work for hotels.com, I'm sure if you scan their user list, you would find the password vacation123. Well, Cool is going to find that word vacation because it's used so many times on the website. So that it'll compile you a password list that you can then prepend 123s and things like that to. But It gives you a common list of words that people will use because they work there that you wouldn't normally get from, say, a password cracking site.
That's fascinating.
That sounds good. So just before we get on to the next question as well, I just want to ask one that isn't necessarily on the list. Has anybody ever come to you and said, we'd like you to do some pen testing, but we know you won't get in? And you've gone, watch this, and you've actually broken through it.
I wish I could tell you some tales.
Oh, the beauty of non-disclosure agreements.
So
right.
Yes, the beauty of non-disclosure. I could tell you some tales.
So that's a frequent challenge where they think you won't get in, and then you just go and prove them wrong.
Well, I'll tell one tale because is the statute of limitations that run out. Back in the days, really before, I was probably one of the first companies in Atlanta that really specialized in security, internet security, when companies were going from dial-up to T1 lines and stuff. And I had a major stock brokerage firm whose name will be nameless that came to me and wanted me to do a security audit on their network. And their CTO I went to this big board meeting with all these guys in these $1,000 suits, and this one big fat guy kept going, oh, well, there ain't no way you're going to get into my network, rah, 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 rah. Well, after doing a little bit of preliminary tests, I can say their outside network, public facing, was really hard. But what I did and I'll have to admit, you've seen this on Hackers, but actually I did it before the movie Hackers. I got me some flowers and I walked around in the office looking lost, and how people put passwords on password notes. I copied this stuff down on Post-it notes.
Of course.
And found a Bank of America bank account that I got into with $6 million in it.
Oh my goodness.
So when I went to do my security, to do my presentation to the board, I got on there and I pulled up Bank of America and I logged in with their creds, and I popped my bank account number into the wire transfer. And I said, look, guys, if you let me hit the submit button, we'll call it even.
I'm guessing they didn't go for that deal.
No, the place went wild.
And what was the reaction of the fat cat when he realized that it was as simple as a Post-it note?
I've never seen a man's face is red, and the Wile E. The old cartoons where the smoke comes out of the ears.
Mhm.
The smoke actually came out of his ears. I've seen that before.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's not that you got pleasure out of belittling him like that. It was just you doing your job, showing that something as silly as a post-it note on a screen can be a major. Forget all the technical stuff. Somebody had written down their password. How crazy was that?
There might be a little bit of enjoyment.
Yeah, the weakest link of security is always the user. Always.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. So speaking of the weak security, we've got this past couple of years we've had these massive amounts of announcements for big breaches from various companies, and just this week there's a huge data breach drop of some data from LinkedIn, Adobe, and many more of from passwords and all kinds of stuff, with 773 million accounts affected. What are the common mistakes companies are making, and is it more so than just the users having password 123 and stuff like that?
No, actually, the biggest breaches that you see like this is, number one is patch your systems.
Yeah.
And because if you look at all the major breaches today, I mean, like Home Depot, Equifax, LinkedIn, it's all where it's sometimes it's systems that haven't been patched in 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
And these systems laying around, that's how they get in. I exploit networks all the time, and it's not like I got a pocket full of 0 days that I use. I use common exploits that are common to everybody, and that's how I get into these systems. And the biggest problem is not patching your systems. That and proper network segmentation. Mm-hmm. Like the Home Depot hack, they were able to get into the DMZ and from there travel through Home Depot's network all the way up to the POS devices in the individual stores.
Wow.
From the DMZ. That should never happen.
Wow.
So there's a favorite expression when you're talking about whether you're doing testing or pen testing or anything like that, and that's lessons learned. So wouldn't you have thought that the industry would have worked out, wow, Equifax got hacked. Why did they get hacked? Because of this. Let's go and check whether or not we've patched all of our systems. And yet still people like Adobe and LinkedIn are being hacked because they're not patching their systems. How can we get the message across that this is our data you're messing with? Make sure your systems are secure. What do we need to do? Or is it just going to be one of those human nature things and it's going to go on forever?
Well, one thing that people can do is quit using that particular system. Voting with your money is the best way to win over anything.
Mm-hmm.
And just quit using the systems. I mean, it's, why do I not use Microsoft? Because it's insecure. And also now with Windows 10, I'm leaking data back to Microsoft that they're turning around and selling.
Right. Yep.
And so I just refuse to use them, and I vote with my pocketbook. And, really, LinkedIn is a good thing to make, work contacts. But then again, is it really worth losing everything you got?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't use LinkedIn, and that's the reason why.
I think part of that is the fact that you have the industry experience, you have the industry knowledge, and you've had those years of saying and watching that pulse very closely to be able to make those kind of decisions. And you've done a lot of interesting things, right? So back in 1972, you worked for the U.S. Navy on a research project. Tell us a little bit about that and what it was like to work with the Navy and what that project was about.
Well, at the time, it really wasn't that fantastic. I actually worked on ARPANET. And at the time I was going to school, the Polaris submarine, to actually what I was learning to do was launch ICBM missiles. And at the time I was using the most sophisticated computer in the world, was what we were told. It was even called a microcomputer. Now, this computer would fill up any normal size kitchen, but they called it a microcomputer.
Of course.
And it ran at a speed of 10 kilohertz. Yes, that's with a K, not an M, not with a G, but a K.
Speed demon.
But as a side project, they put us working on this little research development project called ARPANET, because at the time, if there was a nuclear, and most people don't know this, but the internet was invented because of nuclear warfare. There was a time back in the 60s that a nuclear attack could knock out like 2 or 3 cities and completely knock out communications between the East Coast and the West Coast. So they had to develop a communication systems that was self-routable and also self-healing. And that's where the internet came about. And in the beginning, it all this started on a $144,000 grant.
Wow.
The internet was built by people in the service and also geeks that were trying to get their PhDs in college, because it was built by the geeks at MIT and Berkeley. We were connected. I'll never forget our first Telnet section. We were talking to people through Telnet at Berkeley U, and we just thought that was so cool.
Amazing.
And oh, by the way, the first routable network on the internet was 10.0.0.0/8.
Wow.
What happens if you go there today?
Yeah, you don't go nowhere, but here you'll go.
Wait, it just took me to your website. How cool. Very nice.
So you finished your latest book. There was just a simple question at the end of it, but I want to extend that. When you publish a book, how long does it normally take from like start to finish? And who vets your expertise as to what you're saying is accurate, or does that vetting not take place, so to speak? No,
that vetting takes place. Not only now, like especially that's the hard thing about writing a technical book is it's nonfiction, so you can't spin a tale, and especially in a technical book, everything you're putting in commands. You got to make sure that's going to work for every reader, and explain it well enough that the reader is going to be able to read what you're doing and reproduce it on a machine, and so that takes a lot of hard work. Normally our process is like if I'm writing, thing on an exploit, then after I get done with that chapter, I also turn it over to a friend of mine that's really not even working on the book. And she basically vets my chapter and makes sure that everything works and is understandable. She's not only a hacker, but also has got a English major degree. So
handy.
But then after we get done with it, it also goes through a vetting process with the publisher. The publisher has a technical staff that goes over and makes sure that everything's correct. They check all our copy for plagiarism. Matter of fact, it's kind of funny. I got flagged for plagiarism on my last book because I quoted a quote off my own website.
That's awesome.
Hey, you're plagiarizing this Beau guy?
Yeah.
Doing that?
Yeah. I got a big kick out of that. But also, but I was amazed at how quick they turn it out once they get, actually they work on it as they go. We turn chapters in as we get them done. They take those chapters and send them to review. But really, once we got done with the last chapter, it was about a month and a half, and it was on sale in Amazon.
Wow.
I mean, in print, on sale.
Nice.
Wow. So what can we expect from you next? What's your next big project that you're working on? Is it a bit hush-hush?
Right now, I'm taking R&R after writing that book.
Okay, sounds good.
And the publisher just last week approached me and Wolf about writing a book on a basics book on Kali Linux.
Nice.
And we're talking about doing it. We're in the planning stage of it right now. So I think we're going to do it. And also a little side project I've got going on is, as we all heard, Windows 10 is doing a lot of, copying data off of your systems. And really want to get into the internals of that part of Windows and take it apart and see exactly what dating they're copying and where it's going and that. Because for one thing, in PCI, you're not allowed to have any kind of confidential data on unsecured or servers out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say you've got a vulnerability scan for a client in your user folder, and Microsoft in their EULA says they can copy files and folders from your private user folders. Well, if Microsoft has copied that vulnerability scan, really you're in violation of PCI if you're using Windows 10, technically.
Now does that actually bore out? So, because what I've seen, and granted, I have not dug into it nearly to the extent that you have, but what I've seen in industry is if the company is big enough, they can get away with doing things that technically don't meet compliance standards because they're big enough to get away without meeting compliance standards. I mean, is there ever a time that we get to where they go, yeah, you know what, if you're using Windows 10, doesn't comply with PCI standards, sorry, you can't run credit cards on it, you can't store information on it, we won't sign off on it? Does that happen?
Not yet. That's one reason why I'm wanting to do this report. I want to fully document it and then turn it over to the PCI Council. But sadly, you're right. There are an awful lot of major companies that do get away with being non-compliant. And I wish I could name names on this, because some of these places everybody knows and you would think they're secure, and your money is sitting in a wet paper bag out on the porch as far as security is concerned. Wow. But I can't say.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really, most of the time, the way they get away with it, it depends on the company doing the testing. They'll let them write exceptions or do enough paperwork to get around a vulnerability. One thing I like about Compliance Point, the company I work for, is it's an honest company. We do honest tests. We do honest evaluations. We do honest reports. And we'll do everything in the world to help you pass your PCI certification, but we're not going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one thing I don't do. I don't lie.
Does the company you work for, do they tell you, here are, you're going to use Kali Linux, or we don't want you to use Kali Linux, we want you to use, Windows 7 or Windows 10 or whatever, and then you just kind of go out of the bounds? Do they actually support you doing that? Do they require it? What does that model look like?
Well, since I'm the senior pen tester and I wrote the rules, we're required to use Kali Linux for all testing purposes.
I love it. I like you.
Nice.
That's the way to do it. Again, excuse me while I just jump in and ask a question that's not really there. You mentioned that you're being asked to write a book on Kali Linux. Will that be a very technical book, or will it be? Would you ever consider doing an idiot's guide to pen testing?
This is basically, that's what this is going to be. Basically, it's going to be an idiot's guide to pen testing. Instead of getting into high-level exploits and like pivoting or lateral movement through a domain, we're not really going to get into that. We're going to talk more about, talk about white box testing, black box testing, gray box testing, what those are in detail. The legality, we're going to talk a lot more about the legalities of pen testing in this book. And also a little simpler, setup things in the book. And also we're going to cover report writing and like note taking and things like that the person that's actually getting into this first time doesn't, they think it's all about hacking, but it's like the old saying, the job is never done until the job is never finished until the paperwork is done. And the client, our clients really aren't paying me to crack their network. They're paying for my report.
Yeah.
That's what they want to see, because they got to have my little paper that I wrote to turn into PCI to get their rock. And that's what how I did it, they don't really care as long as they get their report.
Sounds great. So again, excuse me, guys, I'm just finding this whole subject so fascinating. With your books, are you ever worried that you're actually given black hat hackers the knowledge to go and do naughty stuff?
Well, we hear about black hat and white hat hacking. Hacking is hacking.
Mm-hmm.
It's the person that's doing it. It's like a firearm. A firearm is nothing more than a piece of metal. It's a piece of machinery. How you use it, whether you go out and commit mass murder or whether you protect yourself with that firearm and protect your family, is your choice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. Yes, I can make millions of dollars if I wanted to and live in an island off the coast of Tahiti if I didn't have any morals. But I'm an honest and moral man, so I only do, anytime I rob a bank, I give the money back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing.
There you go.
I love it. I love it when people ask me, "What do you do for a living?" And I go, "I rob banks." And I do rob banks.
And I make the banks pay for it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And the banks pay me to rob them.
That is so fascinating. Well, I'm very excited about that idea of the basics book. So as your publisher and them are talking about it, let them know we're all very interested in that, because I would love to start with something along those lines myself. With all that being said, what's the best way for people to follow you and your work so we know when new stuff is coming out?
Well, sadly, in security work, most of the things that I do, I can't talk about. The best way to follow me is I do have a website, www.beauweaver.com, or you can email me at beau@beauweaver.com. And my website does have some stuff that it hadn't had much put up there lately since I've been writing these books. And all my writing has been going to the books instead of the website. But I do have there's a lot of security writings that I've put up there, and some of my sick humor on the site. So
well, you'll have to forgive me because I've just gone to the website, and what has really made me smile is Google Chrome is going, not secure, beauweaver.com.
It's saying it's not secure.
Yeah.
Oh, because it's not HTTPS.
Yeah.
Well, it's not secure because you don't mess with Beau Weaver's website. It wouldn't be a good idea.
Well, the thing is there's no databases. I mean, it's data that you could access through the web browser. So why run HTTPS on it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you go to my mail server or my own cloud instance or anything else that I own, you will find the HTTPS is enabled on all that stuff.
Well, let's put that to the test. What's your mail server IP, Beau? Got him. Yes. No. We want to thank you so much, Beau, for taking the time to join us on Destination Linux. It's just been so much fun talking to you, and I'm very serious. Our Telegram group has just been so interested in this subject, so they're going to be so excited when this episode releases to hear these tales and ways that they can kind of understand this industry a little better, because I think it's very much misunderstood. Especially like what we're talking about with what a hacker truly is, what they do, those type of things. So I appreciate that and hope you'll join us in our Destination Linux Telegram. If that's secure enough for you, perhaps you could join us in there and just listen to some of the questions after the episode, because I know people would love to talk to you about that.
I'll try to.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I want to say thanks for having me on and us talking about this, because you're right. Our work is so misunderstood. It really is. I mean, even amongst the, in the industry, it's misunderstood.
Yep.
Like, it's really hard to get a job as a pen tester, because nowadays in IT, the person, it's not the head of engineering looking for a job, it's HR or a headhunter.
Mm-hmm.
And especially a headhunter has no clue. He's looking on your resume for a bunch of acronyms. And so he doesn't have any clue whether you're a good pen tester or not. And another thing, and also Hollywood makes such a joke out of my job that, I'll just...
You haven't gone running down a runway chasing an airplane with a Cat 5 cable trying to plug it into the tail.
Well, he has.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
No, I did that. I did that wirelessly.
Exactly.
Love it.
But yeah, I mean, TV, and it plays it up such a bad thing, hacking. If you say you're a hacker, you're a bad guy. When, like I said earlier, it's a matter of ethic. It's a matter of the person's morals about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, actually, all you guys are hackers. I mean, I watch your show, and you're talking about hacking Linux systems all the time, because hacking is not necessarily breaking into a system. I've got a book up here on my bookshelf that I've had for about 10 years called 101 Linux Hacks. It does not have anything in there about exploiting Linux systems. It's about hardening Linux systems. You can use a hack to harden the system. And it also got, performance hacks in there for like how to speed up your MySQL.
Yep.
There's, a hack is not necessarily breaking into a system. A hack is an engineer playing with something, actually.
Yeah. It's actually becoming a kind of a funny thing because they're now doing a life hack thing. So there's all these different types of, they're just using the term hack to apply to like manipulating or customizing anything now. So it's kind of coming, it's becoming, at least some people are getting to starting to learn what it is.
Hacker space kind of a thing. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, Beau, I cannot wait because we're all going to be, and hopefully Zeb too. He's got to go fund me out there. We're going to fly him from, where are you from? Marmitistan?
Squiddleland.
Squiddleland.
Close to London in England.
Oh, okay. That's where he's at. We're going to try to fly him down to Self. So the whole crew here will be at Self this year, and we cannot wait to sit down and hang out with you.
Yeah, I can't wait to hang out with you guys. I really love Self. I mean, that's such a vacation for me because one thing, I work from home. I work alone. I only really work with 4 people in the company that I talk to, on a daily basis. So it's really good to go something like that. And, most of my friends, they have, I can't talk about work with them. They have no clue what I do. So it's really great to go to some place and knowing anybody you walk up and talk to will at least have a pretty good idea of what you're saying.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And may have another good idea when you talk about something, may pop up and go, well, besides doing that with that, you could do this.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep.
Really?
Well, just be prepared to do some extra work because I'll be bringing my laptop and say, look, Beau, do me a favor, mate. This laptop's like a sieve now. I've tried to harden it and it failed.
Can you set Chrome as the default web browser so I can use more of my Google services?
That's what Zeb would be asking you.
That's another thing I don't use is Google.
Mm-hmm.
But you do use Firefox, right? Is that your browser of choice?
Oh yes, that is my browser of choice.
There we go.
Beau, you're just you're genius. We love you, man.
Yeah. Firefox is my browser. Yes, it is, and it's also a great hacking tool.
Yeah.
Oh,
really?
Yeah. You got that little developer screen down at the bottom.
Yeah, you got the console and networking. There's a network section tab that you can test things how they load, when they load, things like that.
Yeah, well, pulling down that little developer tab, you can inject stuff into the headers using that. Firefox is a wonderful tool.
Remind us, guys, never to upset Beau, otherwise we might find destinationlinux.com looking a bit weird.
Very good. Well, thanks again, Beau, and we'll have you on the show again in the future, and we'll see you at Self.
Okay, anytime, and I'll see y'all at Self.
Thank you.
First in the news this week is the plans for 2019 from Solus. They issued a announcement. Josh Strobel issued an announcement he's a friend of the show and also the experience lead for Solus. And there is a blog post that is detailing all the changes that we're expecting from the Solus team in 2019. And they've actually broken it out in quarter systems. So the first quarter they're going to be doing releasing for Budgie 10.5 and Solus 4 will finally be coming out. No more 3.99999, etc., etc. So that's great. They're going to have updates to GNOME 3.30 enabled with the implemented new way to support the GNOME 3.28 stack, which is I'm pretty sure that's the LTS version. They also have updates to Kappa, which is the Comprehensive Upstream Provider Pulling Assistant. That does need to be shortened. Yeah, so that's a tracking for a package repository and their individual package system to keep track of everything as far as like dependencies and things like that. And they're also doing some the Linux hardware qualifier, which is really interesting. And Ryan, I'm curious to see what do you think about the latest stuff from Solus? What are you excited about?
I mean, when I was looking at this, I thought, what a brilliant idea from the team, because frankly, I mean, Solus has gone through a lot of change recently, and I think that could have the ability to make people go, oh, is it going to continue? Is there going to be issues? Is there going to be long delays because of some of the changes and things? But clearly, once we had them on the show to talk about it, and when you see news like this where they're very organized with their communication to the community about what's happening, about what their plans are for the whole rest of the year, and all the things that they're working on, being excited that they're just engaged and they're on top of it over there on the Solus team. And lots of people really, really love this project. And so I know they're very happy to see the kind of organization and community outreach that's going out over there. But I thought it was pretty cool in Q2, something simple but very necessary is in their software center. They're going to introduce snaps and flat packs. Nice. And they're also adding a new user experience on top of the software store. So snaps and flat packs have become a big part of a lot of the software that I install, frankly. I mean, a lot of them are in snaps and flat pack. If I see it is an easy snap or flat pack available, I'll just go install it that way because it's just simple and fast. So I think it's cool that they're adding in some of those options and they're focused on stability in the user experience here.
I agree. I mean, I default to snaps and flat packs and app images. You know, whenever I see something that has that, I'd much rather use that because it's just so much easier to deal with. You know, especially with like a snaps, you just say snap install. You don't have to worry about upgrading; it'll just do it itself. So those are really cool, and I'm glad to see that. And they also have a new package manager they're going to be working on for the quarter two, and that is they're calling it Sol, S-O-L. I'm not really. I mean, basically they currently use EOPKG, and they're going to be replacing that. I'm not really sure how much different this one is, but this looks. It looks like they're doing a ton of work. And I mean, I'm excited to see what comes out from this because they are also talking about making Budgie 11 and tons of great things.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I was excited about this. That previously there was always talking about Solus 4 and Budgie 11, and it was all sort of like etherware, and they were never really getting anywhere. But now, and we know it might slip a little bit, he's actually said quarter 1 this, quarter 2 that, quarter 3 that. So if you are a Solus follower, there's things to get excited about and things to keep an eye on as it goes through. And yes, it might slip by a couple of months, but it's now written down in black and white. This is what they're going to try and get out to us. So I think it's great.
Nice.
Yep.
Gnome has been making some performance tweaks, and this has been very exciting to see. It's coming in the Gnome 3.32 cycle, and it appears that they are going to continue to work on stabilizing and improving the experience that you have on Gnome. Canonical has been contributing to this. And what's interesting to me about that is when Canonical announced that they were going to Gnome, this is one of the first times that I ever looked immediately and said, this is absolutely a good thing for desktop Linux. This is going to fundamentally move the football down the field. And everybody on every desktop distribution is going to benefit from Canonical putting the default desktop back to Gnome. And what we're seeing here is Canonical is going through and taking all of the hard work and tweaking and perfection that they found in Unity and saying, okay, here's how you apply that to GNOME. And as long as the GNOME developers are willing to adopt those changes, now you have Red Hat putting in 800 some developers towards a GNOME product and Canonical adding what they can. And then developer Daniel Van Voigt coming back and saying that there are several merge requests out there to help get some additional power out of the GNOME shell. And we've got an entire list. I'm sure those will be included inside of the show notes. If there's any that, Michael or Ryan or Zeb want to touch on, you can dive into those a little bit. But suffice to say that they're making great headway in improving that experience. And that's exciting to see because, again, I think that is going to help all of us, no matter which distribution you're on. Canonical, Red Hat, those companies are going to help get us there.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I find interesting about this list is there's everything there that I haven't got a clue what they're talking about. I'm just happy the list is big and it's going to make an improvement that we can feel on a desktop. Now, Ryan, I know, will understand a lot more about that list than I do, but the fact that it's there and they're putting it again in black and white, that these are the improvements we're going to make, for me, that can only be good for Linux.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would probably look at this list and their eyes would cross. I did look into a couple of these, but ultimately what it boils down to is better performance within Gnome. We know there have been issues in the past with memory leaks and those type of things. Those have gotten patched, and it looks like more work is going into there to, make sure that it's drawing the screens back without latency, to reducing stutter, and just making a better overall performance and experience for the user on the desktop. And a lot of people love Gnome, and that's a very important thing to have. So I'm glad to see the work continuing there. And again, the merge requests are out there. And the people who are putting the stuff together, finding the issues, fixing them, and getting them in they're brilliant, really. They're brilliant minds.
Yep. Sounds really good. Now, this next item up is actually quite interesting because we've got our security expert here, Beau with us. And basically, the big message that he gave to us was all of these recent hacks are because you didn't patch your systems. So there's a System D vulnerability that was discovered. Now, the good news is that they have already been patched. So it's down to you as the user to make sure that you update your systems regularly so that these patches get applied. So the vulnerabilities were found in the System D Journal D, which collects and stores logging data, and the exploit allows a local user to gain root access. Now, again, this is one of those situations where what they're basically saying is they've got to be sat at my machine and they can hack me. Bring it on. There's no one going to get past my door to sit at my keyboard and hack my machine. Anything you want to do remotely, no problem.
Not everyone's 6'6", so I mean, come on.
Fine, that's not a problem. Come into my house and try and hack my machine. So it's great. The thing I love about Linux is someone goes, "Oh my God, we've got a problem," and someone goes, "Yeah, don't worry, I fixed it." 2 seconds before you've read about it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, the first announcement, it was when I first saw it being announced by the Qualys people, they said that 2 of them Red Hat had already fixed 2 of the problems, and the next one was like 2 days later. So it doesn't. It's this kind of thing is not a big deal because it's been blown out of proportion a little bit, especially in like the mainstream media stuff. But what's really good is that it requires local access, or it requires an already compromised computer. So it's not all it is it's a privilege escalation issue, not an actual like hacking vector. But an interesting thing is that the SUSE products like SUSE Enterprise and OpenSUSE, as well as for the latest Fedoras, are not affected by this because they have a different way that they do the stack. They prevent stack clash, which is how this is done. And it's just interesting like that because I didn't know that these distros were using System D in different ways to that level. So it's pretty interesting to find that out.
So, Beau, listen to this. They found that by passing several megabytes of command line arguments to a program that calls syslog, they could get Journal D to crash. This could be used by a local attacker to escalate privileges to gain root access. So that's how it worked there. So what advice do you have here, Beau?
My advice is patch your stuff. because yes, this is one thing I'd like to point out. Yes, this is a local exploit. And like you said, it's a privilege escalation exploit. But let's say somebody has your user account and they get SSH access into your machine. They can still use this privilege escalation because, once they've SSH'd into your box, they're local.
Right.
So you can use this exploit to gain full root access to a box remotely if somebody's got your login. Yes, you can't breach, you have to breach the system some other way, but this is a dangerous thing. But still, the beauty of Linux is every time you hear about a Linux exploit, within 2 or 3 days, there's a fix out there for it. All you have to do is update your machine and you no longer have to worry about it.
Nice. Well said. Thank you, Beau. So in other news, we have Lightworks has big plans in 2019. Now, Noah, I blame you for this entirely. This is all your fault. But a lot of my latest videos, I've been using Lightworks, learning Lightworks, a lot of it because it's a professional suite and I wanted to kind of see what movie studios and things like that. And it works fantastic in Linux, by the way. Right. But they have big plans in 2019. Lightworks 14.6 is expected to enter public beta in the next few weeks. And it will be the final major release of that cycle. But then we're going to have, additional work being done all throughout 2019 to further enhance this product. And I didn't know about you, but I was looking through this list of things that are changing here in just the 14.6 versioning. And I was like, this all looks very exciting. I don't know where everything here is, but I want to play with it.
Yeah, what they're doing is essentially all of the new features that they are adding or working on is to bring Lightworks ahead of the curve. I would argue that Lightworks started behind the video editing curve at once upon a time because they were coming from tape-based workflows. Then they advanced to, with, I believe it was 14 is when they switched to like the static layout and they went to all file-based, essentially treating everything as a clip because that's how we bring in media. And now what they're doing with their addition of network audio and some of those kinds of things and creating these mezzanine files that exist outside so that you can seek smoother and scrub video packages and stuff like that. I think they're going to get ahead of the video editing curve. You look at what Adobe and Final Cut are able to do, and you look at what those users claim are the quote unquote benefits. Well, we've now not only matched that, but the ability to send information out and go into render farms and interface with Boris FX and stuff. And not necessarily all of that works on Linux, but the company in general is moving ahead of the curve. And I'm actually working with a video class that outfitted their entire lab. And mind you, these are people that have no allegiance to Linux per se. It's running on Mac OS, but they've fitted their entire video editing suites all with Lightworks. And part of that is because of the cost effectiveness of Lightworks, but the other part of it is because it's genuinely a more powerful tool than the competitors out there. So if you haven't checked out Lightworks, I would encourage you to do so. It's a very, very complex, very powerful piece of software, really designed for professional video editors, not really meant for your average Joe editing videos at home, but for somebody like you who's putting videos out, daily or weekly as part of his job. It's definitely a tool that you'd want to be familiar with, if nothing else.
Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to kind of highlight this here, because I know this isn't a free and open source project specifically, but the reason why this is very important for me to highlight is there's been a couple of videos that have been released recently by very popular Linux personalities. And some of those videos are talking about the fact that video editing sucks on Linux. Mm-hmm. And it's really frustrated me because I've used all the other tools back in my Windows years, because I think I finally can say I celebrate my 3rd year of using Linux. I've used all of those most of my life. They were great products. Even Final Cut Pro was a fantastic product. But there are options on Linux. Kdenlive is an amazing editor that's completely free and open source. But if you needed something more, you have something like Lightworks, which in my opinion matches those point for point for point. It just, when I got into it, when you were talking about it, I was like, wow, this is what I was used to seeing, on that other OS that shall not be named over there, as far as the quality, professionalism, the quickness of rendering, the special effects and abilities in text, and all of that stuff that people look for is there. It's expensive if you want to get a license, but not outrageous. Not like, if you're doing YouTube and you're making some ad money and you wait for Black Friday, you can.
It's free if you can tolerate 720.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can. Obviously, it's free for 720p. But I think it's important to highlight because there are good options for video editing on Linux. In fact, there are great options for video editing on Linux.
One thing I just want to point out too is that a lot of times a lot of people get hung up and they'll say, well, what is it? What does make a professional tool over, Kdenlive or OpenShot? What is this professional tool? It's not, I don't say that to be pejorative to those other pieces of software. They're fantastic pieces of software, but there is functionality that just fundamentally doesn't exist. And I'll give you an example. We just did a shoot, and we had 4 cameras and we had a setup, and we streamed the shoot live. And so we swapped between those cameras, but in post, we wanted to go back and really tweak those shots and say, well, this particular shot, that guy had his eyes closed, but you can't see it from this angle. We wanted to go back and readjust those camera shots. You can't do that in OpenShot. You can't do that in Kden Live. I can do that in Lightworks. I can bring in a 4-camera system and in post change what shot was live. So stuff like that is hugely advantageous when you're doing this, again, as a living.
Yep, absolutely. And on top of all that, Lightworks 15 is coming out with support for device imports directly from the tool itself. So you'll be able to do your SD card, USB sticks, everything you plug in, you can import right from the tool. So you won't have to import it separately, which I thought was cool. Support for OFX plugins, custom output formats, additional social media platforms built in. And if you've used Lightworks, for instance, and I think this may be what they're talking about, if you go to actually export your video, it has options that you can pre-sign into, like YouTube, for instance, and it will send your video to YouTube for you. You don't have to go and open a separate YouTube piece.
Quick note about that. If you use the Vimeo plugin, you can actually get, I just thought of this, you can get 1080p output for free as well. Their license allows you to export 1080p output as long as you have it linked to a Vimeo profile.
Yep.
Nice.
And we've got support for more audio FX plugins, which I know makes Noah happy.
Very much so.
So we also got some news from the Librem team, or the Purism team, about the new Librem laptops. And the version 4 of the Librem laptops for the Librem 13 and the Librem 15. And these look really nice. Like, I haven't actually personally used one of these, but I really want to. Hopefully the Purism team will be itself. Just an idea. And but anyway, this this new version has the 7th gen Intel Core i7 7500U processors, and that work with Core Boot. And Librem 15 will get up to a 4K resolution for it. So if you want to have like a high res screen, you can get it. So it's really cool. So also they come with options like for their own operating system based on Debian, which is Pure OS. And it has like a 1-year warranty, so you can try it out. And if something goes wrong, they'll fix it for you. But overall, I think that the laptops that they're making are really slick, and I really want to try one out.
Well, I'd be interested to know what you think, Beau, because one of the cool things about a Purism laptop is it actually has hardware kill switches built into it. So you can, from the hardware, actually it has switches on the laptop where you can kill the microphone, kill the camera, kill the wireless, kill the Bluetooth, literally cut the electricity to that component so that it's unusable. Is that something, have you looked into this company at all before, or something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, I've looked into this company, but yeah, that's something on my personal little Tyrannus notebook that I use. That's the one thing I love about this is it doesn't have a camera. If I want a camera, I have to plug a USB camera in it. It doesn't have a built-in mic. If I want to use a mic, it's got the plugs to plug it in. And it's also got a physical switch where I can turn the Bluetooth and the wireless off. Brilliant. That way I know absolutely for sure nobody's going to turn any of that stuff on. And that's something I do worry about. Like the laptop I'm using right now, it's a System 76, and I love it, but there's two things I worry about, and that's the built-in microphone and the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Yeah, so this is an awesome option out here, and I think the pricing on these was not bad for what you're getting when you look at the specs of the system at all. So I was pretty impressed with this, and I'd love to get my hands on one. And Michael, like you said, if they show up to self, maybe they'll just, because we're so awesome a podcast, just hand us free laptops. What do you think?
I think we should contact them and give them a little hint about. I think I'll do that.
yeah, we'll do that right away. It's definitely going to work.
But even if you're not going to ask for a freebie, the fact that they're also offering interest-free financing so that you can split the costs over 6 or 12 months.
Oh yeah,
that might make the decision between whether or not you can get one or not. So
Michael has a hard time affording 50 megabyte hard drives. I think a leader is probably out of the question.
How dare you?
Would you imagine a hacker trying to hack Michael? They wouldn't be able to because they'd be out of space once they logged into his
Google, last week we covered, or I think it was the week before, covered a story about Google and their indiscretion in maybe looking at ditching the Linux kernel in favor of a microkernel to replace on Android and Chrome OS. Well, we suspected that perhaps maybe Google was giving up on Linux. Not the case. This week, we find that Google is actually adding apt search to the launcher. Now, this comes from I believe it was actually a a feature request or a bug request where they had actually titled what it was that they were looking to do and said they wanted to add app search to the browser. So Chrome OS has a beta feature, and they'll be able to install Linux apps right from the Chrome launcher. So the idea is, if that doesn't make any sense to you, sounds like Greek. The idea is, previously you had to drop down to a terminal, actually run Linux commands and type what most people would see as a magical incantation to get software installed. Now you're going to get Linux software the same way you would get any other Chrome app on a Chromebook. So the question that we have for you is, does this diminish the potential learning experience of people getting to learn Linux on Chrome OS, because it makes Linux so far hidden and masks things in Linux so far to the point that it feels just like Mac OS or Windows? Or is it lowering the bar for people to be able to get introduced to the Linux operating system, and thus is going to be your Linux desktop?
Maybe both.
A little bit of both.
I was kind of worried about this because I don't think a lot of people besides us geeks here spend a lot of time thinking about where the tools they utilize come from, let alone thinking about security or anything else. I mean, half the people use Facebook, so clearly they're not too worried about security or privacy. But when you hide it behind the scenes, what Google is doing is they're leveraging the power of Linux, because utilizing phone apps, it turns out, as an operating system isn't so great, right? It has its limitations. It's kind of a cool idea. There's some neat things you can do with it, but it's very limited. So they're leveraging the power of Linux in the app stores that are available there. And as my understanding, it's been apped up to this point, but now they're going to allow you to use other distributions behind the scenes. But now they're going to kind of hide that so that when you're in their app store or you're doing a search through their bar for a piece of software, GIMP or something like that's going to come up. But people aren't going to realize that is Linux necessarily. Now, they may have gone and followed some online guide that said, hey, go into your settings and flick that switch that says go into developer mode and you utilize Linux. But I don't know that most people are going to put that together. Whereas before, when they're having to go in the terminal and other things, I felt like you're almost starting to teach them so that when they outgrow that Chromebook, which you can really fast, they're going to want to go to Linux, and they're not going to be afraid of the terminal, not going to be afraid of searching through software that way, because it's really easy once you learn it. I don't know. I just don't feel good about this.
So devil's advocate says, if I'm the devil's advocate, I would say to you, do you believe that if given the option of learning Linux or not learning Linux, that people would either learn Linux and not abandon it? Because I submit to you that the vast majority, like 90+% of users out there, unless they are geeks and are getting into a Chromebook for the purpose of learning Linux, in which case they're probably not installing Linux apps on Chrome. They're probably actually just legitimately wiping the thing clean and installing Linux. If they're not doing that, then those users are going to try to get the work done that they can on a Chromebook because they bought it at a budget price. And when they're not able to get their work done because the tools don't exist on it, they dump it and they go buy a MacBook. And if we lower that bar for that software to become available, so now you can buy a $250 Chromebook, and guess what? It runs Inkscape, it runs Lightworks, it runs, whatever. And they're able to have native applications that are able to get the work done. Now Linux has elevated itself to be a true competitor with Mac OS or Windows.
I agree. I think that's a good point, but mainly it's because I think that there's an argument of saying that they wouldn't have access to the terminal, they wouldn't be introduced to it, and things like that. But they also might not even care about trying the terminal in the first place. They're like, oh, it's really complicated to get new applications. Why do I care? I'm not going to bother. And they just dismiss it. Or they stop using the Chromebook entirely. Or they just use web apps and stuff like that. But overall, I think the majority of people would not be introduced to it anyway. Like, that's kind of the same thing that people talk about Linux, because when they think that you, in order to use regular Linux, you have to use a terminal. And if they were just forced to use the terminal on Chrome OS, I don't think that would change anything. It would be the same experience of, oh, this is really difficult, and they just choose not to do it. Whereas this way, they at least get to be introduced to the software, and they get to use the software on a system that's slightly less intrusive than Windows, but not that much different. But overall, I think this is it's a good stepping stone, I'd say.
Interesting.
Sounds good. So, on to gaming news. Now, before we find out that actually Google are going to be bringing out their own gaming store, and then that will really, really upset Ryan, Valve have decided to announce a lot of changes that are coming this year. So we've already heard about a lot of companies that are coming to Valve's dominant gaming platform and opening stores of their own. And rather just sit there and sort of go, oh my goodness, we're not going to be the best anymore. Valve has said, well, do you know what? In the background, we're still working on Proton and we're still making your whole gaming experience that much better. But they've actually announced about 7 things that they're gonna, and Ryan can go into more details on these. They're gonna have store discoverability, where it picks up on what it is that you're playing and how you play it and what you might like next. They're gonna update their library. They're gonna add new event systems. They're gonna add Steam TV, Steam Chat, Steam Trust, and Steam PC cafe programs. So before we get on to Ryan, one of the things that I realized that we didn't ask in the interview, and I don't know if it's because you knew he wasn't, Beau, are you a PC gamer at all?
Oh no, I'm not a gamer at all. The only game I play is Hack the Box, which is virtual box running a virtual network with a bunch of exploitable machines on it.
And that Windows machine that's a target in your house, right?
Yeah, that's my gaming machine. It's got a bullseye on it.
Nice one. So over to our resident gaming guru. What's particularly good about what Valve are announcing here, Ryan?
Well, I mean, ultimately, we talk a lot about the fact that competition's a good thing, and Steam is obviously not going to take all the competition of all these stores sitting there, all these different platforms out there starting to step into Steam's territory with trying to get their own stores to take off and those type of things. So it's only going to help us, the users, as all these competitions happen. But it's good to see that Valve is not taking this sitting down. They're adding a lot of neat things in here. But when I saw the last bullet that the Steam PC Cafe program, there was an individual that emailed us a while back that was opening a PC cafe, and they were having issues figuring out licensing and things like that. And Steam at the time was particularly complex. So I was really happy to see that they're going to do some more work making that licensing and ability to open PC cafes up and utilize Steam in those a better experience for people. So maybe I was thinking he's going to, the individual that emailed us, kind of perk up at that and maybe have some options there that will help them with their cafe that they're running.
Nice. Yeah, sounds good.
So up next is the software spotlight, and this is the eDex UI. And what's really cool about this is it is a terminal emulator with a science fiction little hacker approach. It's made for large touchscreens, so it has a built-in keyboard. It has a file manager section, and it looks like a movie, TV show hacker interface thing. It looks like one of those ridiculous, like, imagine a movie hacker visuals with Tron Legacy design stuff and put it all together. But what's really cool about this is that it actually works. Like, yeah, right. It works. The keyboard works as a keyboard. It even works with touch events, so you can put it on a touch screen and tap it and work with a keyboard. The file manager is connected to your file system. All of it works. Like, even has like CPU temperatures and all kinds of stuff. And there's a built-in terminal tab where you can send commands through as well. So it's definitely ridiculous, but at the same time, fantastic.
Beau, if you want to look cool, you need to download this application and have it running on all
Yes, your I will download it tonight so I too can look like CSI Cyber.
He's going to be the Scorpion.
Yes, I am the Scorpion.
Well, if you don't love that, Beau, then you're going to love this tip and trick, because you seem like somebody who would love it if your terminal gave you attitude back while you were typing. So the tip and trick here is, if you go into your terminal, you type vi sudo, one word, at the bottom of the defaults, add a new line, defaults insults, and then you save it. Every time you mistype your password, your terminal for sudo, your terminal is going to insult you. So some of the insults I've gotten as I've had this installed is, harm can come to a young lad like that. There's nothing wrong with you that an expensive operation can't prolong. And where did you learn to type? and something about being a fish brain in one of them. I mean, that to me just sounds fantastic. So I had to install that one. So that's our tip and trick of the week.
Actually, my machine does that.
By itself?
Yeah, by itself. If you type certain phrases that cannot be mentioned on a family show into the terminal line, my machine using Festival starts cussing you out. If you type "thank you" in the command line, it gives you this warm welcome back.
Nice.
So lots of ways you can have fun with your terminal there. So a big thank you to each and every one of you for listening, for supporting, watching us, however you do it. Thank you so much for your support. A big thank you to our patrons for continuing to support the show. And you too can become a patron for just $1. And that's darn near free. Zeb, how can people get a hold of us?
Well, as usual, there are a number of places that you can go, but probably the best one is if you go to destinationlinux.org/contact. And what you'll find there is Michael has given you a whole host of options to connect to us: Telegram group, Discord, Google+, Twitter, Mastodon, etc. And as we talk about in every show, you can contact us via emails at comments@destinationlinux.org. So send us those emails in, keep them coming. They are really interesting, and they add to the flavor of the show.
Absolutely. And also adding to the flavor is when you like that smash button and when you share the show on social media. And also you can check out our individual channels. We all have our individual channels. For Ryan, you can go fill your brains with various different hardware tutorials and even cryptocurrency, like you mentioned earlier. With Zeb, you can go basically just watch him just plow through a ton of caravans on his streams. And with Noah, check out his Ask Noah show, where he takes questions from the audience and but whether it's Linux based or business based, all kinds of things like that. As you can also check out mine at tuxdigital.com, where I do content for This Week in Linux, where it's a news podcast exclusively, like no filler, just news. Well, actually, it's Linux good news. Anyway,
nice.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah. Thanks for the facepalm, Noah. So there you go.
It's rich with you tonight.
Well, we want to give a special thanks again to Beau Weaver. Thank you so much. And you can find him at beauweaver.com.
That's www.beauweaver.com.
Oh, there you go. You don't want to forget that.
Yeah, because I don't wildcard things because I got other servers in my DNS besides the website.
There you go. So everybody out there, have a fantastic week. And remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.